Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're looking at something, it's a real paradox in the world of Android.
It really is.
If you follow the space, you see these two stories playing out all the time. On one hand, you have this breathtaking, fast-paced innovation, and on the other, you have this almost frightening level of neglect.
Exactly. And the sources we've pulled for this deep dive, they just perfectly capture that tension, don't they?
They really do.
I mean, on one side, we have these incredibly urgent, frankly, life or death reports.
Yeah.
We're talking about fatal emergency call failures, new safety mandates coming down from regulators, things that are actually changing how long a device is even allowed to connect to a network.
It's the real-world consequence of a phone becoming obsolete.
Yeah.
And it's terrifying.
It is terrifyingly real.
Yeah.
And then you pivot and you see the other side of the story.
The exhilarating side.
The exhilarating side. Samsung pushing for 2-nanometer chips, advanced AI like Gemini 3 getting baked into everything.
And these amazing community projects, people figuring out how to keep hardware that's like a decade old still useful.
It's a total study in extremes. So we need to figure out how these two sort of parallel timelines are actually impacting you, the user, right now.
Right. So that's our mission today. We're going to try and synthesize all this complexity. We want to show you the very tangible risks that come up when your device support just ends. And at the same time, show you just how close that cutting edge really is.
And I think most importantly, explain why a simple software update isn't just about getting new emojis anymore.
No.
It can literally be a matter of life and death.
So we're going to put the most important stuff right up front for you. The most urgent piece of news is the confirmation of a death in Australia.
Yeah.
Directly linked to an older Samsung phone that failed a critical emergency call. That one incident has forced a huge regulatory crackdown.
And we're going to get into the physics of why your battery can be a physical threat. We'll talk about something called thermal runaway.
And then we'll look at the tech. A potential breakthrough that could finally give us secure, under-display 3D face unlock.
So let's start with that immediate urgency. We really have to unpack this story about the device failure and the mandatory network blocking that came after.
Okay, let's dive into it. This incident in Sydney, it sent, absolute shockwaves through the Australian regulators. On November 14th, a customer who was on a service called Libera, that's a brand that runs under TPG Telecom, they died. And they died because their phone just failed to connect to the 000 emergency number.
And I think a lot of people's first reaction, especially in Australia, would be to think, okay, the network went down again. We've seen that happen before.
Right, another major outage.
Exactly. But TPG was very, very clear. Their network was fully operational when this happened. This was not a system-wide failure.
So the investigation immediately zeroed in on the hardware.
It did. The problem was isolated pretty quickly to the customer's device. It was an older Samsung handset, and the key detail is that it was running severely outdated software.
Which points directly to a very specific technical failure, something called 000 fallback.
Yes, and to really get how serious this is, you need to understand what that fallback mechanism is supposed to do.
Okay, break it down for us.
So in a normal situation, if your phone can't reach its home network, in this case TPG for whatever reason, maybe you're in a bad spot for signal.
Right, a weak signal area.
Yeah, or there's a local issue with the tower. The software on your phone is required, it is mandated, to immediately try and connect to any other available network.
So it should have jumped onto Telstra or Optus or anyone else that had a signal.
Anyone, just for that emergency call. It's a critical safety net built into the system. And the outdated software on this person's phone, it failed. It couldn't make that switch.
Wow. So even if there was a perfectly good signal from another carrier available, the phone was basically a brick in that life-threatening moment.
That's exactly what happened.
Do we know from a technical standpoint why it failed? What was wrong with the software?
The consensus seems to point to a problem in the modem firmware, or maybe an API configuration. It just wasn't properly updated for how modern 4G and voice over LTE networks work.
Ah, so it was designed for an older network standard.
Pretty much. A lot of those older devices, they used 4G for data, sure, but they would actually drop back down to the 3G network to make a voice call.
I remember that. The little 3G symbol would pop up.
Right. And as the carriers started shutting down their 3G networks to reuse that spectrum for 4G and 5G, the old unpatched software on the phone just didn't know how to handle the new protocols for an emergency call. You couldn't make that handover correctly.
The network infrastructure evolved faster than the device software.
Precisely. And what's really I think unsettling here is that this wasn't some unknown zero-day vulnerability. The industry knew about this.
They knew.
Oh, yeah. Telstra and Optus had actually found this exact issue in late October. TPG then sent out warnings to their customers who were using these specific types of phones.
They sent warnings in October and then again.
And again on November 7th. So the problem was identified, the warnings went out, but for whatever reason, the updates weren't installed. Or, and this is the key part for some models, the updates just weren't available anymore.
And that takes us from a warning to a government mandate. The fallout from this death has pushed through a really drastic new federal rule.
This is where it gets huge. The implications are enormous. Under these new rules, any device that has this vulnerability, any phone that remains unpatched, it must be blocked from all mobile networks, period.
Blocked completely.
Completely blocked. And this isn't after a long grace period. The block kicks in after just 28 to 35 days from that first public safety notification.
So they're effectively turning these phones into paperweights to protect public safety. That sets an incredible precedent.
A global precedent, really, about where the liability lies and what the true lifespan of a device is. And, the scale of this isn't small.
How many devices are we talking about?
The estimate is around 50,000 of these older Samsung devices in Australia could be blocked if people don't update or replace them right now.
We should probably list some of the models because people might have these sitting in a drawer or, maybe their parents or grandparents are still using one.
Absolutely. The initial warnings flagged phones like the Samsung Galaxy S6 and the S7 series.
Okay, those are pretty old now.
Very old. The Note 5 was on there, and a bunch of the mid-range J-series phones. The ones that were specifically confirmed were the Galaxy A7 and A5 from 2017.
So we're talking about phones that are 6, 7, 8 years old.
At least. And it's important to make a distinction. The carriers found about 60 different models that had some version of this problem. For some, like a Galaxy S21, you just needed a quick software update. But for 11 of those models, the really old ones,
the ones that weren't getting updates anymore.
Exactly. For those, the only solution was a full replacement. And those are the ones facing this mandatory block.
The financial side of this is huge, especially for people on low incomes. You bought a phone 5 years ago. It still works perfectly fine for calls and texts. And now the government is telling you it's a brick unless you go spend hundreds of dollars on a new one.
It is a massive societal burden. You're seeing the cost of what we call technical debt being pushed directly onto the consumer. And it's sparked this huge debate.
I bet.
Because, yes, safety is the #1 priority. But this mandate, it just accelerates the e-waste problem, and it hits vulnerable communities the hardest, people who rely on that secondhand market.
So the precedent is basically your phone's right to exist on a network is now dictated by the manufacturer's support window.
That's the new reality, yeah.
What was the corporate response? I imagine Samsung and TPG had to say something.
Oh, they did. Samsung put out a statement expressing, profound sadness and condolences and really stressed that keeping software up to date is critical. TPG's CEO, Iñaki Berroeta, he was just as direct. He urged people to update or replace their phones immediately.
You can understand the urgency, especially after what happened with Optus earlier this year.
Well, that's the context, isn't it? That massive Optus outage was linked to 3 deaths. Now, that was a network infrastructure problem, a totally different cause.
Right.
But the regulators are now hypersensitive to anything that messes with 000 access. It doesn't matter if the fault is in the network or on the device. Their tolerance for any kind of technical problem is just neat. It's 0 now.
Okay, so that establishes the life or death risk of a software failure.
Yeah.
But the danger with our phones, it's not just about the code.
Not at all.
We need to pivot now to the physical risk, the silent threat from the batteries inside these things.
Yes. The charging safety risks are just as serious.
We are surrounded by lithium-ion batteries. I mean, they're in everything. Your phone, your laptop, e-bikes, those e-scooters you see everywhere.
Power tools, vape pens.
Everything. And we love them because they're light. They last a long time. But that same chemical efficiency, that's what makes them volatile. There's a real risk of fire.
And we need to understand the science behind that risk.
Yeah.
It's a process called thermal runaway.
Okay, what is that exactly?
It's basically the point of no return for a Li-ion battery. It starts with a short circuit inside one of the battery cells. That short causes the temperature in that one spot to start rising fast and uncontrollably.
And that heat creates a chain reaction.
A cascade effect. The heat breaks down the chemical structure inside the battery, specifically the thin wall, the separator between the positive and negative sides.
And when that wall breaks?
The whole thing goes. The chemicals decompose and they release these gases that are both highly toxic and extremely flammable.
And if the battery is fully charged when this happens?
It's much, much worse. The sources are really clear on this. It's not a slow, smoldering fire.
Yeah.
It can be violent. You get intense sparks, even jet-like flames, as all that pressurized gas ignites at once. It's a rapid, explosive event.
And it's incredibly hard to put out.
Extremely difficult.
So what triggers that initial short circuit? I mean, they don't just spontaneously catch fire, right?
No, they don't. The safety guidance points to three main culprits. The first, and this is probably the most common one, is incorrect charging.
Using cheap cables.
Exactly, using those cheap, non-compliant, counterfeit chargers and cables. They don't have the right circuitry to regulate the power, so they can overcharge or overheat the battery past its safe limits.
The second one seems obvious, but people probably underestimate it.
That's physical damage. You drop your phone, you get a crack, a dent, maybe it gets crushed in a car door. Anything that compromises the physical structure of that battery inside.
It can breach that thin little wall you mentioned.
It can. And if the positive and negative sides touch, you get an immediate, massive short circuit. Even if the phone looks just a little bit swollen, that's a huge warning sign.
And the third one is water.
Yeah, prolonged exposure to water. It doesn't have to be a big dunk in the ocean. Even just moisture getting inside can cause corrosion over time. That corrosion can eventually build up and bridge the gap between the internal parts, creating a short.
And this isn't just a theoretical danger. We have a documented case from Sydney in 2018 where a non-compliant charger actually led to a fatality.
That case from Gosford is just chillin'. A 28-year-old woman was electrocuted. She died while using her phone, which was plugged into one of these cheap, non-compliant USB chargers. She was also using a laptop.
And the report said she had burns on her chest and ears.
Yeah, which indicates the electrical current passed through her body. The investigation by the NSW Department of Fair Trading was really important here.
What did they find?
They found the failure was all about the charger's quality. It used, inferior plastics, shoddy circuitry, not enough insulation, and somehow that failure allowed the full 240 volts from the wall socket to reach the low voltage parts of the phone, or her.
Which is exactly what the regulations are designed to prevent.
Precisely.
Yeah.
That's why you have to look for that regulatory compliance mark. And the penalties for selling this junk, they reflect how serious this is.
How serious are we talking?
For an individual caught selling non-compliant gear, it's up to an $87,500 fine and or 2 years in prison.
Wow.
For a company, that fine jumps to $875,000. The government sees this as criminal negligence, and rightly so.
Okay, so given how severe these risks are, let's get really practical. We should walk through the official safety advice step by step. People need to know this.
Essential information. It starts with your gear. Only use the charger that came with your phone or a certified third-party one that has that RCM mark on it. Avoid those super cheap ones from the gas station at all costs.
And unplug it when it's full.
Yes. Don't leave it plugged in all night, just sort of soaking on charge.
I think a lot of people are guilty of that one.
I know I am sometimes, but just as important is where you charge it.
Right. Heat is the enemy.
Heat is the enemy, so you can't charge it on your bed, on the couch, on a carpet, or especially not under your pillow. Those soft surfaces trap all the heat and dramatically increase the risk.
So charge it on a hard, flat surface like a desk or a countertop.
Exactly, and the guidance is very clear. Don't charge things unattended, and especially don't charge them overnight while you're asleep.
I have an old tablet I use for reading, and it pretty much lives on the charger overnight. This whole conversation is making me rethink that habit immediately.
It's that implicit trust we have, right?
Yeah.
But we need to be vigilant.
Yeah.
Keep devices out of direct sunlight. Don't leave them in a hot car. And for bigger batteries, like for an e-bike or power tools, the advice is to charge those in a garage or a shed if you can. Keep them out of your main living space, away from bedrooms.
Okay, what are the warning signs? How do you know if a battery is going bad?
Any kind of physical change is a huge red flag. If the case is bulging or swelling, if it looks discolored or blistered, if you smell a weird, strong chemical odor, or if it's getting really hot to the touch, not just warm, but hot.
Any sounds?
Yes. Listen for popping, hissing, or crackling sounds. That's a sign of internal failure.
And if the worst happens, if you see smoke or fire?
Safety first. Evacuate. If it's a small device and it's plugged in and you can do it safely without touching the device, unplug it from the wall. Try to get it outside onto a non-flammable surface like concrete.
And if there are flames?
Get out. Immediately. Close doors behind you to contain the fire and call 000. And this is critical. Tell the operator it is a lithium-ion battery fire.
Because the firefighters need to use special equipment for that.
They do. And those gases are toxic. Do not breathe them in. If you've been exposed or have burns, you need to seek urgent medical attention.
And finally, how do you get rid of old batteries?
So this is non-negotiable. You can never, ever throw them in your regular trash or recycling bin.
They're a huge fire risk in garbage trucks.
Huge. You have to take them to a proper certified recycler. Programs like Mobile Muster, Planet Arc, B-Cycle, they know how to handle these things safely.
So the physical risks are real, the regulatory risks are real, and they both really stem from the same core issue, a device reaching the end of its supported life. So let's connect all this back to what that actually means, to this device support cliff.
Yeah, if that 000 incident taught us anything, it's that we have to be really precise about what unsupported actually means. Because a device has two different kinds of updates, and mixing them up can be, as we've seen, fatal.
Right. The first kind is the one everyone notices, the big OS update. This is your Android 15 or Samsung's One UI 7. The new features, the new look.
When a device stops getting those, it's annoying. You miss out on the cool new stuff. But your phone doesn't just stop working.
Your apps still work, for the most part.
Yeah, for years usually. Your banking apps, the Play Store, they all keep working because of backward compatibility. So the end of OS updates, that's the first sign of aging, but it's not the big security red flag.
The real danger zone, the real trigger, is when the security updates stop.
That's it. Security updates are exponentially more critical. These are the patches that fix newly discovered high-severity bugs and vulnerabilities.
And we're not talking about small bugs.
No, we're talking about terrifying stuff. Things called remote code execution, where an attacker could take over your phone completely from anywhere in the world. Hardware memory bugs, lock screen bypasses.
And every month your phone misses one of those patches, it gets more and more vulnerable.
The risk just grows and grows because the bad guys know exactly which holes haven't been plugged on your device.
This is where Google has actually made a really smart move to try and fight this. Something called Google Play System Updates, or Project Mainline.
Project Mainline is a game changer. It was introduced with Android 10, and it basically lets Google sidestep the manufacturers and the carriers.
How does it do that?
It allows Google to push security patches for some of the most critical parts of the Android system directly through the Play Store.
So, even if my old phone isn't getting its official monthly update from the manufacturer anymore, Google can still patch some of the biggest security holes itself.
As long as it's running Android 10 or later, yes, it's a vital safety net. It can patch things like the media codecs, which are a huge target for attackers, or the permission controller, even the Android runtime itself.
That's a pretty strong layer of protection. I'm guessing there's a catch. It's not a complete replacement for the full manufacturer update, is it?
Absolutely not, and that is the cruise to caveat here. Play system updates can only patch certain parts of the OS, the parts Google has made modular.
So what can it touch?
It can't fix vulnerabilities that are specific to the hardware, like a bug in the chipset's firmware. It can't patch things deep down in the device's kernel. For those, you still need that full official update from the manufacturer.
So even with Mainline, if your manufacturer has stopped sending updates, your phone is still accumulating unpatched vulnerabilities over time.
It is. It's better than nothing, a lot better, but it's not a complete solution.
And that really puts that network blocking mandate in a tough light, doesn't it? It basically forces hardware to become e-waste, which goes against all these environmental goals.
That's the tension right there. We are, as a society, choosing immediate physical safety over the long-term environmental sustainability of these older devices.
So the message for you, the listener, has to be this. When your phone reaches the end of its full security update support,
that's your signal. That is the clearest sign that it is time to upgrade. Your phone has everything now. Your banking, your digital ID, your two-factor codes. You just can't risk that on a device with out-of-date security.
The good news is, the industry seems to be finally getting this message. The support windows for new phones are getting much, much better.
It's a really positive trend. Google with their Pixel phones, Samsung with the Galaxy S series, they're now both offering 7 years of support.
7 years? That's a huge jump from the 2 or 3 years we used to get.
It's revolutionary. It totally changes the value proposition. And others are catching up. OnePlus and OPPO are offering 4 or 5 years on their new models.
That shifts the whole reason for upgrading. It's not about being forced to by security risks anymore. It's about choosing to because you want the new features.
Exactly. But we have to remember that safety net is only for new phones you buy today. It does nothing to solve the problem for the millions of people still using a Galaxy S7 who are now facing that mandatory network block because their support window closed a long, long time ago.
That duality is the perfect way to frame this. The forced retirement of old tech, right next to the radical innovation in new tech.
Okay.
So let's leave the anxiety behind for a minute and look at the future, the exciting stuff, starting with the chips.
The heart of the machine.
Samsung's getting very aggressive here. They are not happy playing second fiddle to Qualcomm. And their strategy for the new Exynos 2600 chip is, what's bold?
It's pure competitive pricing. All the reports are saying they're going to price the Exynos 2600 to seriously undercut Qualcomm. We're talking like $20 to $30 cheaper per chip.
That's a huge discount in a high-volume market. That's a clear shot across the bow.
It's a statement. They want to get their chips into a lot more phones from other brands, not just their own Galaxy devices. And this is how they're planning to do it.
Can they afford to do that, though? I mean, chip development is insanely expensive. How can they sustain that kind of price cut?
They're betting on volume, and they're betting on improving their manufacturing process. The report suggests they're hitting a 60% yield rate for this chip.
So 60% of the chips they make are good enough to sell.
Exactly. Which is pretty solid. And if they can sell them by the tens of millions, that volume can make up for the lower profit margin on each individual chip.
And they're not just thinking about this generation. They're already talking about the next big leap, 2-nanometer chips.
Well, yeah, they're already publicizing the performance gains they expect from their first ever 2-nanometer chips. We probably won't see them until the Galaxy S26, but it just shows you how fast this is moving.
Smaller transistors mean more power and better battery life.
In theory, yes. Better efficiency for all the AI stuff that's coming, and hopefully longer battery life, which, ironically, you'll still have to charge carefully to avoid the problems we talked about earlier.
Right. It all connects. Now, speaking of innovation, let's talk about something that has been a huge design problem for years. Secure face unlock on a phone with no notch.
The holy grail of phone design. A true all-screen phone that's still secure.
And it looks like we might finally have an answer. Under-display time-of-flight cameras.
This is a really clever solution to a very tricky physics problem. The goal is to get that same level of security you have with Apple's Face ID, but on a phone where the camera is completely hidden under the screen.
So why doesn't Face ID's technology work under the screen?
Okay, so Face ID uses something called structured light. It projects thousands of tiny, invisible infrared dots onto your face in a very specific pattern.
Right, and it reads the distortion in that pattern to make a 3D map.
Exactly. It's incredibly precise. But the pixels of a display, even the transparent area for the camera, they act like a tiny screen door. And that screen door messes up the light. It causes so much diffraction that the precise pattern of dots gets completely scrambled. It just doesn't work. It's a non-starter.
But time of flight is different.
Totally different approach. A time of flight or TUF camera doesn't use a pattern. It just sends out a single big pulse of infrared light, a flood of light.
Okay.
And then it measures the time it takes for that light to bounce off your face and come back to the sensor. By calculating that time, it builds the 3D depth map.
And because it's a big, simple pulse of light instead of a delicate pattern.
It's much more robust. It's not as easily scrambled by the pixel grid. The theory is that the stronger signal can punch through the screen cleanly enough to get the accurate depth data you need for secure biometrics.
If they pull that off, it solves one of the last big design compromises on flagship phones.
It really does. You get that perfect, symmetrical, all-screen design without giving up the high-level security you need for mobile payments and digital IDs.
And just to round out the hardware news, there are leaks about the new Galaxy Buds 4 Pro.
Yeah, the design is changing a bit, but the really interesting part is the new feature, head gestures. It's another move towards a more seamless, hands-free way of interacting with your devices.
All right, let's shift from the hardware to the software. We already have a code name for the next version of Android.
We do. Android Canary has confirmed it. Android 17 will be Cinnamon Bun.
Haha, I like it. So beyond the name, what are we expecting feature-wise? It looks like they're focusing on gaming again.
Gaming is always a huge focus. The rumors are strong that Android 17 will get native game controller remapping built into the OS.
That'd be great. No more third-party apps just to get your controller working right.
Exactly. And they might even add a virtual gamepad feature, too.
And a few other things are rolling out now, right? A new font.
Yep. The new Google Sans Flex font is now out for everyone. And for those with the latest Pixel phone, the Pixel 8 and 9, there's a new app called Pixel Journal. It seems to be a dedicated space for tracking and reflection, probably with some AI smarts baked in.
Which brings us to the main event for Google, AI. Specifically, Gemini 3.
Gemini 3 is everything for them right now. It's not just a chatbot anymore. They're embedding it deep into the foundation of the OS. We're seeing reports that Gemini 3 is being used to help developers make Android apps faster.
And it's being used for personal stuff, too.
Yeah, like fine-tuning your workout plan. It shows how they're moving beyond simple queries to using its advanced reasoning for complex, everyday tasks.
And on the App Store side of things, it looks like Google is finally cracking down on one of the biggest user complaints: battery drain.
About time, right. They're planning to flag and maybe even downrank apps in the Play Store that use an excessive amount of battery. It's a way to force developers to be more efficient.
Which is good for everyone. It makes your hardware feel like it lasts longer.
Exactly. We also saw a big win for the power user community recently.
On sideloading.
On sideloading. Yeah, for a while there, it looked like Google might really lock down the ability to install apps from outside the Play Store. But after a lot of pushback, they backed down. Sideloading is safe, which is critical for keeping Android an open platform.
And just to close out this section, a quick look at the market shows quality is still all over the place.
It really is. We saw reviews calling the new OnePlus 15 a confusing downgrade, which is never what you want to hear. But then, on the other end, the budget Motorola Moto Geo 6 is getting praise for having a premium look and feel for a low price. So you still have to do your research no matter how much you're spending.
All right, which brings us full circle back to that support cliff. If the big manufacturers are forcing older, perfectly functional hardware into obsolescence, who steps in to keep this stuff out of the landfill?
Well, often it's the community. And there's no better example of that right now than an incredible project called Trixie.app.
Trixie is.
Yeah.
It's a direct response to this problem of mandated obsolescence, isn't it?
It's a complete counter-narrative. The project's stated goal is environmental. Keep useful devices out of the landfill. And it does that by letting you install a full Debian 13 desktop or server onto almost any rooted Android device from Android 5.0 onward.
We're not just talking about a command line here. This turns an old phone or tablet into a surprisingly capable little computer.
It's so impressive. It supports a full remote desktop experience with really good performance using software rendering. You can run normal Linux apps on it. And my favorite feature is the SharePlay sync support.
What does that do?
It means you can take an old Android tablet, install Trixie, plug it into some old dumb speakers, and suddenly you have a modern AirPlay 2 receiver. You've made your old audio gear useful again without buying anything new.
That is incredible utility from a piece of hardware that its own manufacturer stopped supporting years ago. Is it hard to install?
If you're someone who is comfortable with rooting your device, it's actually pretty easy. You install the APK file, give it root permissions, and hit install. The one critical thing is you have to write down the password it gives you on the screen because it only shows it to you once.
And that gets you into a full desktop environment on your old phone.
A full X-Space desktop, yeah. And the developer is smart. They even included a warning that ties right back to our battery safety discussion.
What's the warning?
They say if your device has been sitting dead in a drawer for a few years, you really should replace the battery before you start running a full Linux system on it 24/7.
Because an old, worn-out battery is a huge risk for swelling or thermal runaway when you suddenly put it under a heavy load again.
Exactly. They know that a good battery isn't just for power, it's a safety device.
The community also fills these really specific gaps that big companies would never bother with. The slow jogging metronome app is a great example.
Oh, I love this kind of story. It's solo developers solving their own problem. This person practices a very specific type of running called slow jogging, which is all about maintaining a precise, consistent cadence.
Steps per minute.
Right. And they looked at the App Store and saw all these bloated, complicated running apps, but nothing that just did that one simple thing really well.
So they built it themselves.
They built it themselves. It's minimalist, it's focused, it gives you a precise audio and visual metronome, has a screen that stays on while you run so you can see your time, and it tracks just the basics. It's perfect user-driven development.
But community efforts can also lead to conflict, which we're seeing with the whole Pebble and Rebel situation.
This is a classic tech legacy drama. So the Pebble smartwatch, it was beloved, but the company died. The community, through a project called Rebel, kept the watches working for years using their own servers and software.
They kept the platform alive.
They did. But now, the company that bought Pebble's old assets, Core Devices, is being accused of taking the work the Rebel community did and using it for their own commercial products, allegedly without credit or permission.
It raises that really thorny question of who owns a platform when the community is the only thing keeping it from being a paperweight.
Exactly. It's a conflict we're going to see more and more as old tech platforms get retired.
And that brings us to the most alarming part of this legacy risk conversation. Old, unsupported Android versions being used in critical infrastructure.
This is the nightmare scenario. We have reports that Flock security cameras, which are used all over the place for public and private security, they're running on Android 8.
Android 8, Oreo, that's from what, 2017?
Yeah, it is years and years past its end of life for security patches. And if one person using an old phone is a fatal risk, what happens when critical infrastructure, like a city's surveillance network, is running on software that is just riddled with known, unpatched exploits?
That's a massive blinking target for hackers.
It's a disaster waiting to happen. The entire system is fundamentally insecure. Someone could potentially access the camera feeds, disrupt the network, or even take control of the devices themselves. The stakes are just exponentially higher than with a consumer phone.
What a journey. From a single tragic device failure to the grand future of mobile tech. I mean, this has been a really unsettling but also really exhilarating deep dive.
It really covers the whole spectrum.
We started with that grim reality of device safety, the confirmed death from that emergency call failure, and the very real, very violent fire risk from lithium-ion batteries.
And we learned that knowing your device's security status isn't just a techie thing, it's a fundamental part of staying safe.
We then connected those threats to the idea of the device support cliff, and we stressed that it's the end of security updates that should be your trigger to upgrade.
And we saw that while Google's Project Mainline is a really good safety net, it's not a silver bullet. You can't fix everything.
And yet, at the exact same time, the future is just. It's barreling towards us. We have Samsung's aggressive push for 2nm chips and that amazing technical fix with under-display TOF cameras that can finally perfect the all-screen phone.
I think the core lesson here is about being vigilant in two ways. You have to be absolutely ruthless about the basics. Check for updates, charge your devices safely, and know when it's time to retire old hardware, because the consequences are severe.
Right.
But you also see that this ecosystem is still this incredible engine for innovation, and that innovation is driven just as much by huge corporate investments as it is by the cleverness of community projects like Trixie. Knowing your device's support timeline isn't about features anymore, it's about your safety, both physical and digital.
So if we take all of that whole paradox and boil it down, we're left with a really challenging final thought for you to consider. Given that the failure of older, unsupported devices to perform a critical safety function, like that 000 fallback, is now leading to them being mandatorily blocked from networks.
Turning them into e-waste?
It's exactly. Turning millions of physically functional but software obsolete devices into e-waste. What are the unintended societal consequences of that?
Yeah.
What happens when we create this massive new stream of electronic waste that we're just completely ill-equipped to handle?
The regulators have forced a choice on consumers. An immediate, often expensive choice between their own safety and environmental sustainability, and we have no idea what the long-term environmental price of that choice is going to be.
A challenging thought indeed. Thank you for joining us on The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.